think we're about there, so we will make a start. Perfect, thank you. So thank you so much everyone for coming along and joining our first club webinar. This session will be on the Sport England Community Emergency Fund that was announced at the end of March. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Claire and I'm Clubs, Leagues and Schools Manager at Table Tennis England. I'm joined today by a number of colleagues, but also by Greg Yarnell, who's our club of our development and volunteering head of department. So you may have noticed that you're currently muted. That is simply just to minimise the background noise and interference. But I would like to highlight that we do welcome questions and comments throughout this webinar. So there's several ways you can do that. You can either type your question in the chat box, as some of you have already been doing so far, or if you just pop your name in the chat box, we will then be able to invite you to unmute and you can then go ahead and ask your question. Obviously, this is a fairly new fund, so we may not have all the answers today, but we will certainly answer what we can, and anything that we are unsure of or we need a bit more clarity on, we will take back to Sport England and of course come back to you with the answers that you need to complete your knowledge on this fund. We will of course be sharing the slides as well from today's presentation. There are a number of links included within the slides, so hopefully this will help navigate and get you to the points on the Sport England website that you need if you are considering an application to this fund. Greg, is there anything that you'd like to say as well before we get started?
Hi everyone, hope you're all well. Not massively clear, just I guess just a thank you everyone for joining us today. It's great to have you all here to kind of talk to you about the Sport England funding, and I'm sure Claire will come on to. We want to be able to support you as in the clubs and coaches as much as we can through this time, which I know is challenging for some. And yeah, it's fantastic to see how all the stuff that's been going on by clubs, we see it on kind of social media, or you send us it in, and through some of the phone calls we've been having with you, it's good to see all of the activity that's happening. So really appreciate you supporting your members and sharing that with us, so we can then share with Sport England. And Sport England have actually pulled out all the stuff that the sport and table tennis clubs have been doing on their insight guides. So they've done a particular focus on Brighton Table Tennis Club, but also as part of that have had a link to the Table Tennis England kind of play at home page, which features some of our own activities like TT Kids, but also feature all of the stuff you guys are doing with the challenges and how you're keeping your members engaged. I think Henry from Corby Smash is on or Ketchin and Corby Smash is on the call, who did a live session as well. So lots of great stuff going on. So thank you for helping us to kind of bring table tennis to life with both Sport England and the general community.
Cool. Thanks, Greg. So yeah, so for the next 10 minutes or so, we will be looking at what the Sport England Community Emergency Fund is, who can apply and how, and also how Table Tennis England can help through this application process as well. So at the end of March, Sport England announced a 195 million package to help support sport and physical activity through the coronavirus. And this announcement had 4 key areas. So there was 115 million funding rollover for key partners, 55 million for sector stimulation, 5 million sector partner fund, and the 20 million community emergency fund. So obviously this is where we will focus this afternoon. But if you did want to find out more about each of these funding pots, then you can do so by following that link at the bottom of the slide there. So a bit about the Community Emergency Fund then. This fund really aims to deliver immediate funding to those who are most in need. It's specifically targeted at organisations who have a role in supporting the nation to be active, but who are experiencing short-term financial hardship or the ceasing of operations due to the ongoing crisis. Eligible organisations include sports clubs that have been forced to close at short notice, but who are facing ongoing costs. And we'll go on to the types of costs and the things that can be funded through this pot but things like rent, maintenance that you guys may be continuing to have to pay for, even though there's no activity ongoing. And also eligible organisations are voluntary and community sector organisations who deliver or enable sport and physical activity. In terms of what the funding can be used for, organisations, so clubs and leagues, can apply for between £300 and £10,000, and that's to cover costs such as rent, utility bills, insurances, facility or equipment hire, core staffing costs that can't be met by other government funds, and retrospective losses dating back from the 1st of March as well. So a couple of examples here then of things that could be considered for funding. So this funding can be used to support a table tennis club to pay for their utility bills and other costs whilst no activity is taking place, or potentially to support a local league who have paid for new equipment to run a competition, but that competition is now cancelled, so won't receive any of the money from the players that would have paid to enter. So that's just some examples there of what the costs can cover, what the funding can cover. In terms of what the funding can't be used for, again, there's some really specific things here that the funding does not cover. So activities or costs that are already covered by other government funding, new activities or events, and we've included a link there to the Sport England funding page. So there you will find a list of their other grant schemes that can be used for new activities, things like the Sport England Small Grant, for example. It can't be used for capital works, and it can't be used for costs beyond the end of July 2020. Really key here to stress that it is expected that applicants will have exhausted all other government funding sources before applying to the emergency fund. And the link again on this slide will take you to those support mechanisms and those other funds that are currently available through the government.
Sorry, Claire, can I just throw in there? I think where there's a question asked on the Sport England call. This is Greg, by the way. Sorry, should have introduced before I spoke. That they covered about, someone asked a question about if clubs are applying for some government money, but also don't want to miss, but won't find out about that perhaps for 3 or 4 weeks, and therefore don't want to miss the boat on the Sport England money. I think the advice, correct me if I'm wrong, Claire, was to apply for both initially, or to get your Sport England application ready still. But obviously, if you do receive money from the government, then that Sport England grant wouldn't be able to go ahead. So you can't obviously receive double funding. But yeah, so I think where you access government but don't know 100% you're going to get it, then it's worth working on your Sport England one as well.
Cool. It probably is worth pausing actually at this point as well and seeing whether there's any other questions that anyone has at the moment before I move on to the funding criteria. Just have a quick scan of the chat box. Okay, cool. So moving on then. So Sport England have.
Sorry, Claire.
Yeah.
One popped in at the last minute. Is around. Can you give some examples of what retrospective losses covers?
Okay, thank you. So that could be if you've paid for something. I guess that's similar to the example with the league competition. So it could be you've paid out for something already that you would have recouped the income in this period, and you're now no longer able to run the activity that would have generated that income, so you've lost out in that respect. Does that answer that question, Greg?
Yeah, I think so. Oh, okay. Yeah, I think that covers it. I think it's so the fund can backdate, I think, until 1st of March, costs until the 1st of March. So there may have been stuff that you cancelled because you were uncertain whether things were going to go ahead, and therefore you incurred costs that you weren't able to recoup from participant fees or through organisation fees. But yeah.
It was just really to clarify what was meant by retrospective losses, because they didn't really give any examples of what that would cover. But obviously, if you have laid out for expenses for events, that would cover it. But would it cover other things like income that you would have generated over that period? So it was just clarification really on what exactly that meant as what would be covered.
Okay. So things like if you've had to pay for facility hire, or you've paid for equipment hire and all those kind of things, and you're no longer able to generate that income back. Does that help, Martin?
I think you're on mute, Martin.
No, that's fine. Yeah, it was just going dead there slightly, but yes, that's fine. It just covers. I think it's just helpful to, if anybody got any queries with regards to exactly what does that mean exactly.
Perfect. Thank you.
I think what will be important, sorry Claire, is that there is a really clear explanation of how revenue has been lost as a result. So I think it may be difficult to receive funding where you've ended up, you've spent some money, but there's been no revenue lost, or you're in a no different position, and you're trying to recoup some of those costs that are laid out. I think that would be difficult, and there needs to be a clear explanation of why this puts the club in a challenging position, and why revenue has been lost as a result, and therefore a retrospective loss has occurred.
Cool. I can just see another question popped in there as well about sharing the slides. So yes, we will email around the slides afterwards as well, so you have access to this information and to the links that are included. We are trying to video it as well, so if the video works, we will also share that. Okay, so moving on. So Sport England have given 4 criteria for this funding. It is a competitive fund, and there will be lots of applications, as I'm sure you can imagine. So evidencing how you meet these criteria is really important. So the first one is around audience and reach. So Sport England will be prioritising those whose work does one or more of the following. So delivers activity in disadvantaged areas, or works with some key groups. So the ones they've listed here are women and girls, disabled people, lower socio-economic groups, LGBT+, Black, Asian and minority ethnic groups, or those with long-term health conditions. They'll also prioritise organisations that are maintaining an element of self-employed workforce that's not covered by funding, via the government funding. So I guess here it's really important to know the community that you serve and to be able to pull out these key groups. So if you, for example, you're running bat and chat sessions, or if you would not ordinarily be running sessions in partnership with a local community organisation, or female only sessions, all that work that you do that helps to reach those groups that are highlighted there. The second criteria is around the role that you play. So organisations must have delivered or enabled community sport in the last 12 months. So hopefully that's an easy one. But then also be proactively staying in touch with participants throughout this period. So Club Matters and Table Tennis England actually have produced some guidance around how you can stay in touch with members at this time. There's some really good ideas on our website, again, that have come in from lots of clubs, as Greg mentioned earlier. And I'll share those links as well afterwards, so that you guys are able to see them for some other ideas of how you can potentially keep in touch with your members at this time. The third one, the third criteria Greg sort of alluded to a moment ago, is around demonstrating the clear financial need that you have for this funding as a result of the current situation. So questions in the application form will cover things such as the expected financial impact for you over the next 3 months, the minimum expenditure that you'll have to meet whilst activity isn't happening, and any immediately available unrestricted funds that you may have access to. Sport England have highlighted that applications won't be penalised for having reserves. All well-run organisations should have those, but it helps with the overall assessment of the organisation's situation. And then the fourth criteria is the impact of not receiving funding. So you need to, I guess, demonstrate the consequences of not receiving funding and how that impacts on your organisation's ability to deliver sport and activity. And here, I guess, is another opportunity to mention and refer to those groups that were referred to in the first criteria. and how those people might be affected if your organisation isn't successful in receiving this grant. Does anyone have any questions or anything to add at this point? Okay. So in terms of the application process then, all of the information that you need to apply can be found on the Sport England website and via the link that's included on this slide. So we will of course share this, as I mentioned earlier, we'll share this all round to you. There are some steps to be taken though. So of course, as with any other funding, read thoroughly the funding guidance and the criteria that is on the Sport England website. On this page of the website, there is a downloadable PDF for the questions that you're asked. So take a look at the questions and consider those as part of the application. Complete the online applications form, and then your application, once submitted, will be reviewed and all applicants will be contacted. I think initially Sport England were hoping to be able to contact applicants within 7 to 10 days, but this has been slightly extended due to the sheer volume of applications that have been coming in. So I'm going to hand over to Greg at this point, just to talk a little bit more about how Table Tennis England can support you through this process, and also open up to any questions that you might have. As I say, pop your questions in the chat box, or feel free to pop your name in the chat box and we'll unmute you as well so you can ask your question.
Thanks, Claire. So yeah, just I guess reiterate some of the points that kind of Claire made and how we can potentially support you in some of that, and I'll also touch on our BTT program, which I think most of you are aware is usually out around this time. We were due to go out 2 or 3 weeks back, but obviously held off to review the best use of that funding. So we'll touch quickly on that, and hopefully we'll be able to share more information later this week as well, with details of how you can apply for some of that funding. But yeah, we're really keen, as I mentioned at the beginning of the call, to support clubs and coaches as much as we possibly can with these applications. We have through Info just got some staff on furlough now, so 3 of our kind of area-based staff are on furlough. So Andrea Holt, Mark Willerton, and Sally Shutt, who's based up in Yorkshire. But we've got lots of other members of staff that are still able to support you through the process. And I'd encourage everyone to either share those applications with us, because it's always well for someone else to lend their eye over it, and hopefully have a conversation with us. I think some of the things that we can probably help with more is around the areas that Claire mentioned in the couple of slides ago, around those target groups, and how you can pull some of that information out. So I think it's probably just thinking outside the box a little bit with some of those areas. So Claire mentions kind of older people, band chat sessions is an obvious one. Our sport generally has a high 50+ participation rate, so it's clearly a good one to focus on. But in terms of the kind of higher disadvantaged areas, I think whilst your club you may not think is based in a disadvantaged area, you may know that a lot of your members come from disadvantaged areas, and a particular school that you have a good relationship with, for example, that is perhaps in an area which is of a higher deprivation. So I think kind of think about your members and the organisations and schools that you work with, and try and think about whether you can link that into your application. The other thing we can potentially look at is the kind of percentage of females and stuff within your club. So a membership across Table Tennis England is 10%, or just under, of female members. But so if your club has more than that, I think again that's a really good thing to think about pulling out. A lot of clubs, especially kind of the bigger clubs, will have 20, kind of 25, 30% female members. Not sure if Draycott are on the call, but I know 50% of their juniors, for example, are members, I think, are female. So just really good things to think about how you pull it out. And whilst 20% in your eyes might not seem a lot to have of female members, when you compare that to the Table Tennis England membership, then it clearly your club's doing great work in that area. So I think where you can compare things to other areas of the sport, then do try and do that to show that your club is actively engaging in those communities. But yeah, in terms of that staff support, I think off the back of this call, if you've got any further questions, then probably, yeah, if you know your area member of staff, then feel free to touch base with them directly. Obviously, if you're unsure or they're one of those that have been furloughed, I think first place probably go to Claire, and then Claire can either support you directly, or we can put you in touch with your area member of staff that can help you through that process. But yeah, please, even if you feel you've got the skills to do it yourselves, the application, do let us know that you plan to apply and you have applied. It just helps us with the bigger picture and knowing where we can better support as well. In terms of the BTT program, obviously this is usually focused on activity around kind of young people, women and girls, and a lot of shorter format league work, but we have changed the scope of that slightly, kind of moving into the next season, whenever that might be for us. But there will be a pot still ultimately that will look at those areas, and we would still be keen for those areas to be projects in those areas to be bid for. We want to continue to work on those areas. They're clear priorities for us. But we also plan on opening up a section of the fund to support clubs and leagues to get people back playing again, to get new people back playing again off the back of this. We know there's lots of table tennis tables in the home have sold out in for a lot of companies. So there's clearly a lot of people buying table tennis tables. I've seen at least kind of 3 or 4 or 5 videos of people training their partners or their children up at home who have never played before, but have suddenly found a bit of time in their hands, and they're training them up on a robot or whatever. So there's clearly a lot of people that have started to play off the back of this. So part of the funding will be directed to support clubs as to how we best support you to get things back up and running again when the time comes. So we hope to launch that later this week, if not the following week. And Jenny Leach, who's on this call, is leading that program. So yeah, within the next kind of 10 days, hopefully that will be out there for people to look at and see. So we hope that helps clubs going forwards. And yeah, as it comes out, if you've got any questions about how you can use that, then yeah, do let us know. That's it from me, Claire. But yeah, happy to open up for questions, I guess, for us.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I can just have a quick look through the chat box. I can't see any questions that have come through. Thank you, Martin, for sharing that link to areas of deprivation as a guide. We'll make sure we circulate that afterwards with the slides and the notes as well. Has anyone else got any questions that they'd like to ask at the moment at all? Okay. Well, so just to reiterate what Greg said, really, any questions, any queries at all, please do get in touch. I've put the help email address on the slides, but obviously the presentation will come directly from me, so feel free to get back in touch with me with any questions. I really hope you found it useful this morning or this afternoon, and yeah, hope you all have a good afternoon and hopefully speak to you soon. Thank you very much, everyone.